Welcome to Books in 10. Remember, we're raffling an iPhone when we reach 10,000 subscribers. Like, subscribe, and journey with us into this fantastic book.
Oh, yeah.
Share with your friends and let's create the biggest book community on YouTube together.
Absolutely.
Oh, there's a link to purchase the book in the pinned comments. Enjoy.
Yeah, check it out.
We're accepting book requests to create content within. Suggest the best titles in the comments. Now, let's go. Today we're diving deep into Aristotle's On the Soul.
Yeah, On the Soul, really a classic text, exploring the very essence of life.
It is.
What makes something alive? What is this soul we talk about? Aristotle tackles these questions head on.
Yeah, and it's fascinating because he approaches it from a philosophical perspective,
Right.
not a religious one.
Yeah.
Whenever I hear soul, I immediately think of the spiritual realm.
Right. But Aristotle isn't concerned with the afterlife or anything like that. He's trying to understand the soul as this principle of life, the driving force behind all living things.
So it's more about what animates us in this world, what makes us tick.
Exactly. He uses this term, first grade of actuality. It sounds complex.
It does.
But it's actually a very practical idea. Think of it this way. Imagine a beautifully crafted guitar.
Okay,
it has all the right materials, the wood, the strings, but it's just an object, right?
Right.
It can't play music unless someone picks it up and brings it to life.
So the guitar has the potential to make music, but it needs something more to actually do it.
Yes, and for Aristotle, that something more is the soul. It's what turns the potential for life into actual living, functioning life. Like a musician strumming the guitar, the soul is what activates a living being.
Okay, I'm starting to grasp this idea of the soul as an activating force. But if we're talking about the soul as the essence of life, wouldn't that mean my houseplants have souls?
Aristotle would say yes.
Really?
They do. And here's where his theory gets even more intriguing. He believed that plants and animals have souls too, just different kinds of souls.
So there's a hierarchy, like a soul ladder.
Exactly. He starts with the most basic type, the nutritive soul. This is what plants possess. It's responsible for the basic functions of life: growth, reproduction, taking in nutrients.
So they're alive, but they aren't exactly pondering the meaning of existence.
Probably not. Then you move up the ladder to animals. They have what Aristotle called the sensitive soul. This gives them the ability to perceive the world through their senses, to see, to hear, to smell, to taste, and to touch. They also experience pleasure and pain.
And that brings us to humans, right? We're at the top of the soul pyramid with our big brains and philosophical ponderings.
Yes, we have what Aristotle called the rational soul, which gives us the ability to think, reason, make decisions, and contemplate complex ideas like the nature of the soul itself.
So our souls are like super souls, incorporating the powers of the lower souls. We're like soul multitaskers.
That's a great way to put it. According to Aristotle, our rational soul contains the powers of the nutritive and sensitive souls as well. We have the basic life-sustaining functions of plants, the sensory experiences of animals, plus our unique capacity for reason.
That's pretty mind-blowing. Now, I want to touch on something we often associate with the soul: movement. Did Aristotle think that the soul itself actually moves around, like some sort of ethereal being flitting about?
Actually, he argued against that. He believed that movement requires a physical location, what he called place. And since the soul is not a material thing, it can't move in that way. It can't occupy space.
So no soul aerobics then?
Not quite. But here's the fascinating part. While the soul itself doesn't move, it causes movement in the body. It's the driving force behind our actions. You decide to take a walk. That's a thought, a function of your rational soul. But that thought then triggers your physical body to take those steps.
So if the soul itself doesn't move, but it's causing movement in the body, would it be fair to say that the soul acts like the captain steering the ship?
That's a great analogy. The soul sets the direction and the body carries out the action. It's a beautiful illustration of how Aristotle saw the soul and body working together. And speaking of experiencing the world, let's move on to another fascinating aspect of Aristotle's theory: sensation.
All right, let's dive into that. When I think of the senses, it seems pretty straightforward. I see a sunset, I smell freshly baked bread, I hear music playing, input, output, done.
But Aristotle believed there's a lot more to it than meets the eye, literally. He argued that while we perceive the world through our senses, the process itself is much more complex than we realize. He distinguished between potential sensation and actual sensation.
Okay, I'm intrigued. What's the difference?
Think of it like this. A match has the potential to ignite, right? It
Well,
has all the necessary components, but it needs something to activate it, like striking it against a surface.
mhm.
Similarly, our senses are always on, but they need a specific stimulus to trigger actual sensation.
So our senses are like these little detectors constantly scanning the world, waiting for something to set them off.
Exactly. Take touch, for example. Your skin is always in contact with something, whether it's your clothes or the air around you, but you don't consciously feel every single point of contact until something specific happens, like a bug landing on your arm or someone tapping you on the shoulder.
That's a really interesting way to think about it. So we're constantly bombarded with sensory information, but our minds filter out what's not immediately relevant.
Precisely. And for Aristotle, this filtering process is a key part of how we make sense of the world. Now, here's something else that might surprise you. Aristotle was adamant that there are only five senses: sight, hearing, smell, taste, and touch. No more, no less.
No sixth sense. What about intuition or that feeling you get when someone's staring at you from behind?
He directly refuted the idea of any additional senses. His reasoning was rooted in his understanding of the four elements: earth, air, fire, and water. He believed that each sense organ was specifically designed to perceive a particular element or combination of elements, and that these five senses covered all the bases.
So for him, the five senses perfectly aligned with his understanding of the physical world.
Exactly. It was a very systematic and comprehensive approach. And of all the senses, he considered touch to be the most fundamental.
Why touch? It seems so basic.
Aristotle believed that all animals, in order to survive, must have the sense of touch. It's the most direct way we interact with and experience our environment. It allows us to avoid danger, find food, and navigate the world around us.
It's like our primary connection to the physical realm, the foundation upon which all the other senses build.
Yes. It's the most basic way we perceive and understand our surroundings. And now that we've explored how the soul experiences the world through the senses, let's turn our attention to what truly sets the human soul apart: thinking, the realm of the rational soul.
Yes, let's delve into that. What did Aristotle have to say about this unique capacity of ours?
He saw thinking as the highest function of the soul, what truly distinguishes us from all other living beings. And he had this fascinating concept of the mind as a blank slate.
A blank slate. You mean our minds are empty vessels waiting to be filled with knowledge and experience?
That's a great way to put it. Aristotle believed that the mind has the potential to understand anything because it's not limited by its own inherent nature. It becomes what it thinks. Imagine an artist standing before a blank canvas. The possibilities are limitless.
So we aren't born with predetermined limits on our understanding. We have the potential to learn and grow infinitely. That's a pretty powerful idea.
Absolutely. And this leads us to a crucial question. If the mind truly is a blank slate, what shapes it? What are the forces that mold our minds and determine what we know and how we think?
That's a deep question. What factors did Aristotle believe were responsible for shaping our minds and influencing our understanding of the world?
Well, for one, he believed that our senses play a crucial role in how we acquire knowledge. For Aristotle, our senses were kind of the primary gateways to knowledge.
So we see a tree, hear a bird sing, and those sensory experiences like somehow imprint themselves on our minds.
Well, it's a bit more nuanced than that. He argued that our senses provide like the raw data, but it's our minds that actually make sense of it all.
Okay.
We don't just passively receive information, we actively process and categorize it.
So it's not just about seeing, it's about understanding what we see, making sense of the input.
Exactly. And this process of understanding involves several key steps. First, we have to distinguish between different types of sensory input.
Right.
We need to recognize that, okay, this is a sight, this is a sound, and so on.
Like sorting the mail, sight goes in the sight bin, sound goes in the sound bin.
I like that analogy. Then we connect those sensory experiences with existing knowledge. We relate what we're seeing now to what we've seen before.
So we're constantly building on our understanding of the world.
Yeah,
Each new experience adds another layer.
precisely. And through this process of connecting new experiences to existing knowledge, we form concepts and ideas.
It sounds like a snowball effect. The more we experience, the more complex and nuanced our understanding becomes.
Now, here's where it gets really interesting. Aristotle believed there was a hierarchy of knowledge, just like there's a hierarchy of souls.
A knowledge ladder. I'm curious. Tell me more.
Okay, so he starts with sensory knowledge. This is the most basic level, coming directly from our senses. It's knowledge of particular things, like this specific tree or that specific bird.
The raw data, unfiltered and immediate.
Exactly. Then we move up to what Aristotle called experience. This is kind of a generalized knowledge based on repeated sensory experiences.
So if I see enough trees, I start to form a general concept of treeness, the common elements that make a tree a tree.
That's it. And at the very top of the knowledge ladder is scientific knowledge. This type is based on abstract reasoning and universal principles.
The kind of knowledge we gain through study, analysis, and deep thought, going beyond the individual instance to the underlying principles.
Precisely. And Aristotle believed this highest form of knowledge was the most valuable and enduring.
Because it's not just about specific trees. It's about understanding the very nature of growth, change, and the interconnectedness of life.
Exactly. Now, you might be wondering, how do we reach that top rung? How do we go from basic sensory experiences to this like profound scientific understanding?
It does seem like a massive leap. What bridges that gap?
For Aristotle, the key was reason, that defining characteristic of the rational soul.
So it's our ability to think and reason that allows us to move beyond simply experiencing the world to truly understanding it. We make connections, identify patterns, and extract meaning.
Precisely. Reason enables us to abstract from particular experiences, to see the common threads, and to formulate general principles.
It's like we're not just passively absorbing information, we're actively making sense of it, weaving it into this coherent tapestry of knowledge.
And this active reasoning is what leads us to true wisdom and understanding. But Aristotle didn't stop there. He also explored how we use this knowledge, how it affects our actions and choices. That's where his concept of practical wisdom or phronesis comes in.
Okay, this is intriguing. What exactly is phronesis? Is it like street smarts? Common sense.
It's more than that. Aristotle believed that true knowledge wasn't just about theoretical understanding. It was about being able to apply that understanding to like real life situations.
So it's not enough to know what's right. You
Yeah.
have to be able to do what's right, put knowledge into action.
Exactly. And practical wisdom involves several key elements. First, you need a clear understanding of your goals and values. What are you striving for? What's important to you?
You need a compass to guide your choices.
Yes. Then you need the ability to accurately assess the specific circumstances you're in. Each situation is unique with its own nuances and challenges.
Like reading a map. You have your destination, but you need to understand the terrain, the obstacles, the best route to take.
That's a great analogy. And finally, you need the capacity to make sound judgments about the best course of action, considering both your goals and the specific context.
It's like a balancing act,
Yeah.
weighing different factors, anticipating consequences, and making the most prudent choice.
And for Aristotle, this ability to make sound, practical judgments is what allows us to live virtuous and fulfilling lives.
Because it's not just about knowing what's good in theory, it's about being able to actually do good in the real world, to translate knowledge into action, thought into deed.
Precisely. But here's the thing. Aristotle believed that practical wisdom isn't something we're born with. It's a skill we develop over time through experience and practice.
So it's like learning to play a musical instrument. The more you practice, the more adept you become.
Yeah.
You hone your skills through repetition and refinement.
And he believed that one of the best ways to develop practical wisdom was to study the lives of virtuous people
Yeah.
and learn from their examples.
So we can learn from the wisdom of others, from those who have already walked the path.
Absolutely. By reflecting on their choices and actions, we can gain insights into how to apply virtuous principles in our own lives.
It's like having a mental mentorship program, drawing inspiration and guidance from those who embody practical wisdom.
That's a fantastic way to put it. Now, we've spent a lot of time discussing the rational soul and its powers. But it's important to remember that for Aristotle, the soul wasn't just about thinking.
Right.
It was also about feeling.
Right. We're not just disembodied intellects. Emotions play a huge role in our lives.
Exactly. And Aristotle had some fascinating insights into the nature of emotions and their role in a well-lived life.
I'm all ears. What was his take on emotions?
First, he believed that emotions are not inherently good or bad. They are simply natural responses to certain stimuli.
So it's okay to feel things. Anger, joy, sadness, they're all part of the human experience.
Absolutely. However, he also believed that it's crucial to cultivate the right kinds of emotions and to express them in appropriate ways. There's an art to feeling.
So it's not about suppressing our emotions, but about understanding them, guiding them, and channeling them in constructive ways.
Exactly. Aristotle argued that we can learn to regulate our emotions, to strengthen the ones that lead to virtuous action, and to weaken the ones that are detrimental to our well-being.
So we're not just slaves to our passions. We have the power to shape our emotional responses.
Precisely. And this process of emotional cultivation was, for Aristotle, an essential part of living a virtuous life. It's not just about knowing what's right, it's also about feeling the right way.
Our hearts and minds working in harmony. That's a beautiful concept.
Mm.
So to recap, we've covered the hierarchy of souls, the role of the senses, the power of reason, the importance of practical wisdom, and the art of feeling. Aristotle's theory of the soul is incredibly complex and nuanced.
It really is. And it provides such a rich and insightful way of understanding what it means to be a living, thinking, feeling human being.
It's a lot to wrap our heads around.
Uh-huh.
As we move towards the end of our deep dive, is there one key takeaway you'd like to leave our listeners with?
I think the most important takeaway is that for Aristotle, the soul isn't some separate ethereal entity. It's an integral part of who we are. It's the animating principle that makes us alive, that allows us to experience the world, to think and reason, and to live meaningful lives.
It's the very essence of our being.
Exactly. And by understanding the nature of the soul, we can gain a deeper appreciation for our own humanity and for the interconnectedness of all living things.
That's a profound insight. It really leaves us with a lot to ponder. As we wrap up our deep dive into Aristotle's On the Soul, I find myself wondering if the soul is truly the essence of our being. Does it persist beyond our physical bodies? What happens to the soul after death?
That's a question that has fascinated philosophers for centuries, and it's one that Aristotle himself grappled with. Unfortunately, On the Soul doesn't provide us with definitive answers, but it does offer us a framework for thinking about these big questions and for contemplating the mysteries of life, death, and the human spirit.
Yeah, it's really making me rethink how we often view the soul as this separate, almost mystical thing. Aristotle brings it back down to earth, showing how intertwined it is with our everyday existence.
Right, and that interconnectedness really highlights how he viewed the soul as a unified whole. We can talk about the nutritive, sensitive, and rational parts,
Right.
but they're not operating in isolation from each other.
Right. It's not like we have these separate compartments in our souls.
Right.
It all works together.
Precisely. Think about it. Your ability to perceive the world through your senses is influenced by your physical state.
Hmm.
Your capacity for rational thought is affected by your emotions. It's all this complex interplay of factors.
It makes you realize how much we take for granted. This deep dive is giving me a whole new appreciation for how intricate and amazing life really is.
And that's what's so brilliant about Aristotle's approach, you know?
Yeah.
He's not just trying to define the soul.
Right.
He's trying to understand the whole living being, body and soul working in harmony.
Okay, here's something just popped into my head. We talked about how the soul is responsible for movement.
Yeah.
But what about the different kinds of movement? Is there a difference between a plant growing and a cheetah running?
That's a great observation. Aristotle recognized that different living things have different capacities for movement, and those capacities are directly related to their types of souls.
So back to the soul hierarchy.
Exactly. Plants, with their nutritive souls, are limited to the kinds of movement associated with growth, reproduction, and taking in nutrients.
The essentials for survival.
Right. Then you have animals with their sensitive souls. They have a wider range of motion. They can move through space, seek out food and mates, react to their environment.
And we humans, with our rational souls, can do all of that and more.
Mm,
We can move with intention and purpose based on our thoughts and desires.
precisely. Our movements aren't just reactions. They're like expressions of our inner world, our values, goals, and aspirations.
Wow, so there's a whole philosophy of movement embedded within Aristotle's theory of the soul.
Absolutely. And it leads to another fascinating point. For Aristotle, the soul isn't static.
Right.
It's constantly developing and changing.
So we're not born with fully formed souls. They evolve over time.
Yes. Our souls are shaped by our experiences, interactions with the world, choices, and habits. And as our souls develop, so do our capacities for movement, sensation, and thought.
It's like a continuous feedback loop. Our experiences shape our souls, and our souls shape how we experience the world.
Now, while we've been focusing on Aristotle's ideas, it's important to remember that his views on the soul have been debated and reinterpreted throughout history.
Right. He wasn't the last word on the subject.
Not at all. Philosophers and theologians have been grappling with the nature of the soul for centuries, and there's no single universally accepted definition.
So there's still plenty of room for us to explore and ponder.
Absolutely. And that's the beauty of philosophy. It's not about finding definitive answers. It's about engaging in like a continuous dialogue with the great thinkers of the past and present.
It's a journey of discovery, not a destination.
That's a great way to put it. And as we continue this journey, I think it's vital to remember that Aristotle's On the Soul isn't just an ancient text.
Mm.
It's a living document full of insights that can enrich our understanding of ourselves and the world around us.
So much food for thought. As we wrap up this deep dive, what one provocative question would you leave our listeners with to continue pondering on their own?
Given Aristotle's emphasis on the connection between the soul and the living body, it's fascinating to consider how modern scientific advancements like artificial intelligence or gene editing might, challenge or even redefine our understanding of what it means to be alive and ensouled.
Wow, that's a really mind-bending question. It makes you wonder what Aristotle would make of these cutting-edge technologies.
Yeah.
And it underscores how relevant his work still is today, even after all these centuries. Thank you so much for taking us on this incredible journey. I know I'll be thinking about these ideas for a long time to come.
It was my pleasure. I always enjoy exploring these timeless questions.
And to all our listeners, thanks for joining us on this deep dive into Aristotle's On the Soul. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this episode with your friends. Until next time, happy reading.